Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I am Dr. Asma Sadiq from Anatomy Department, and today I'm going to discuss with you the development of midgut. So you have seen that embryologically developing gut loop has been divided into three parts. These are the foregut, midgut, and hindgut. Foregut is the part which is starting from distal to the pharynx till the opening of the bile duct, which is the proximal portion of the duodenum. And in the gross anatomy, you have seen that is the second part of the duodenum where the bile duct is opening. So till the opening of bile duct, the part of the duodenum is included in the foregut. So the developing structure from the foregut, so you can say these are the derivative of the foregut are the pharynx, esophagus, stomach, the proximal part of the duodenum till the opening of bile duct, and other structures which are going to appear as diverticulum from the ventral wall of the foregut. These are the thyroid and parathyroid gland, the tympanic cavity. The respiratory diverticulum is giving rise the trachea, bronchi, and the lungs. Then is the hepatic diverticulum, which is giving rise liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So these are the structures which are derived from the foregut, and they have their own blood vessel from the aorta, that is the celiac trunk. So the celiac trunk and its branches, they are supplying all the structures which are derived from the foregut part of the gut tube. The midgut portion, that is now the distal part of the duodenum, which is distal to opening of bile duct till the right 2/3 of the transverse colon. So these are the structures which are derived from the midgut. All the structure including the distal part of the duodenum, the jejunum ileum, all the small intestine, appendix, cecum, ascending colon, and then the portion of the right 2/3 of the transverse colon is derived from the midgut, and they all receive the blood supply from superior mesenteric artery from the aorta, which is the artery of midgut. And the hindgut structures, they are the rest of the gut, which is the left 1/3 of the transverse colon till anus, and also the endodermal epithelial lining of the urinary bladder, that is derived from the hindgut. So these are the structure that receive their blood supply from the inferior mesenteric artery from aorta, which is artery of hindgut. So you must remember and memorize this table, that all the structure which are derived from foregut, midgut, and so in the previous lecture we have done with the development of the stomach, and now moving forward, now is the development of the small intestine, including the duodenum as well as the midgut structures. So the duodenum, that is the portion which is derived from the foregut as well as midgut. So its development starts in the 4th week. Then this is definitely from the endodermal structure of the primordial gut tube. You have seen there is the appearance of that hepatic diverticulum, and this hepatic diverticulum has the connection with the ventral wall of the foregut through this duct. So this duct in future is going to become the bile duct. So where is the opening of that bile duct, or you can say till the part of the hepatic diverticulum, the structures of the gut tube are the foregut structures, and distal to this hepatic diverticulum, and in future this is going to become the bile duct opening. Then distal to this, rest of the structures, these are the derivatives of midgut. So that means that the duodenum is derived from foregut and the midgut. So it is derived from the caudal part of the foregut and cranial part of the midgut, as well as the contribution of the splanchnic mesoderm, which is surrounding the duodenum. So the junction of the two parts of the gut, it lies just below or distal to the opening or origin of the bile duct. So you must remember this point, that is very important. So definitely I would like to mention here that the duodenum is going to receive from the branches of the celiac trunk as well as from the branches of the superior mesenteric artery. So the portion which is derived and which is the part of the foregut, it receives its blood supply from celiac trunk, and the portion distal to the hepatic diverticulum and where there is opening of the bile duct, distal to that, the rest of the duodenum receives its blood supply from the branches of superior. So now this duodenum, that is going to become secondarily retroperitoneal structure. Initially this is enveloped in the double fold of this peritoneum and it is intraperitoneum, but with the growth and with further you can say it is associated with the rotation of the gut, which is going to make it a C-shaped loop, and then this is going to adhere to the posterior abdominal wall. So it is just wrapped in front or to the anterior aspect with the peritoneum. So all those structures which are initially intraperitoneal, and then with the development its mesentery is going to fuse with the posterior abdominal wall in such a way that these structures are going to plastered with the posterior abdominal wall, and they are only going to wrap from its anterior surface. It has only the anterior covering of the peritoneum. These structures are labeled as secondarily retroperitoneal structures. As you have seen here, that initially it is in the mesentery, then it's one layer that is plastered and fused with the posterior abdominal wall with its parietal layer, and only they are going to have they are just covering from the anterior aspect, and rest they are going to plastered with the posterior abdominal wall, and their mesentery is going to absorb and there is absorption and fusion of the visceral layer of the peritoneum, making them secondarily retroperitoneal structure. So the secondarily retroperitoneal structure are the duodenum, their second and third part. As you have seen, the first part of the duodenum receives the lesser omentum, which is the hepatoduodenal ligament of the lesser omentum. So that is intraperitoneal, and the last fourth part is also intraperitoneal, which has the attachment of the root of the mesentery. So only the second and the third part of the duodenum, these are secondarily retroperitoneal, and I hope you know now that these structures which become retroperitoneal, these are immobile structures. They are going to become fixed and they are immobile. Then are the pancreas. We will study them in the next lectures. Ascending and descending colon and the upper part of the rectum. These all are the structures which are secondarily retroperitoneal structures. Again here you can see that initially this is a peritoneal structure, and then there is a rotation. That rotation is associated with the rotation of the stomach. When there is the rotation of the stomach, it is going to relocate the duodenum more towards the right side as the pylorus is shifting towards the right and a bit upward with its final rotation of the stomach. So that is also moving along with it the duodenum, and it become a C-shaped structure. And also its mesentery, when it become very close to the posterior abdominal wall, then it plastered to the posterior abdominal wall and its mesentery fused there. So they become the secondarily retroperitoneal structure. So here to show you all the structures in the yellow color, you can see that these all structures are peritoneal, intraperitoneal structures. They have their mesentery and peritoneum. The red one are the retroperitoneal. Definitely you have seen the esophagus, which is present in the posterior mediastinum, and this one which is the rectum. They are truly retroperitoneal structure. Also you can say these are the subperitoneal structures, kidneys and all these red colored. These are the retroperitoneal or subperitoneal structures. Now the secondarily retroperitoneals I have shown in dark color, that is a bit orange color here, which are showing you that initially these structures are intraperitoneal, but later on they are going to become secondarily retroperitoneal structure. The second and third part of duodenum, the pancreas, ascending and descending colon, these are secondarily retroperitoneal structures. So duodenum is most commonly seen, it is present in the right quadrant of the abdominal cavity, and this is associated with the all the rotation of the stomach. So after the final rotation of the stomach, when pylorus is shifted more towards the right side and in upward direction, that is shifting and pushing the duodenum towards the right quadrant of abdomen, and with the progressive growth of the duodenum, it attains the C shape duodenal loop. So that is actually the rotation of the stomach, which is pushing and relocating the duodenum to the right quadrant of abdominal cavity. And as you have seen in all the tubal structure, there is the epithelial proliferation leading to the obliteration of the lumen, and then later there is recanalization. Same in the duodenum. After 5 to 6 weeks, there is the rapid proliferation of the endodermal or epithelial cell, which is obliterating the lumen of the duodenum. And after 8 weeks of development, there is the appearance of the vacuoles because of the cell death, and this is leading to the recanalization of the duodenal lumen. So duodenal lumen that appears back by recanalization process, but if there is failure of the recanalization, this is leading to the stenosis or atresia. Whenever there is a partial obstruction or partial occlusion of the duodenal lumen because of the failure of recanalization process, we label this as duodenal stenosis. But if it is complete occlusion of the lumen of the duodenum, then this is known as the duodenal atresia. The most common site of the duodenal atresia is the junction where the bile duct is opening. So that is the area of the hepatopancreatic ampulla, where bile duct and pancreatic duct join together and opening into the duodenum. So at that site, there is most common duodenal atresia are reported. So whenever there is duodenal atresia, just after birth, the infants have shown the vomiting, and the vomitus, it contains bile secretions as well. So that is the bilious vomiting, and it is associated with the distension of the abdomen, most commonly in the epigastric region. So whenever there is duodenal atresia, then this is associated with the bilious vomiting, number one. Number two, there is the distension of epigastrium. And also this duodenal atresia is associated with the polyhydramnios. And this is as there is no absorption of the and swallowing of the amniotic fluid, so that is leading into the polyhydramnios. Atresia, they can be diagnosed by the double bubble sign in the radiographs or ultrasound. These are typically the double bubble sign representing the duodenal atresia. So you must remember last time there was a scenario based on that double bubble sign. So whenever there is double bubble sign, just think for duodenal atresia. This is because of the appearance of or accumulation of the gas shadow in the stomach. This area, this is the area of stomach, and this is the proximal duodenum. As I have told you, the most common area, that is the junction and opening of the bile duct. So above and proximal to that, there is the distension because of the gas in the proximal duodenum plus in the stomach. So these two areas, they are showing you typically the double bubble sign. So this is a gas filled stomach, you can say, and this is the proximal duodenum. So this is a typical sign for duodenal atresia. So now moving on to the development of the hindgut. So this is the stomach you have seen, then duodenum, and all the rest of this loop, that is the midgut. And you have seen previously that this midgut is had this connection, that is the vitelline duct. So this vitelline duct is indicating that this area is a midgut. So initially midgut has two loops, that is its or you can say the limbs, two limbs, that is the cranial limb of the midgut, and this is the distal limb. So there is a physiological herniation. Before herniation and during physiological herniation, there is a primary rotation of the midgut, that is 90-degree counterclockwise. So whenever this is going to twist and rotate 90-degree counterclockwise, and the axis of the rotation is superior mesenteric artery. So along the axis of superior mesenteric artery, this is showing you 90-degree counterclockwise rotation, which is now they are showing you now that this distal, or the limb which is a caudal limb, that is moving up, and the cranial or cephalic limb is moving down. So by this rotation, there is the these limbs, they are going to move in a opposite way. Then this is a physiological herniation, and during that there is a further growth of the midgut loop, and then this is going to retract back. So in this physiological herniation, there is again 180-degree counterclockwise rotation, and then the gut tube retracts back to the abdominal cavity. So you must remember, the first rotation is 90-degree counterclockwise when the gut loop is going to herniate into the umbilical cord, and when it is going to return back, then rest of the 180-degree counterclockwise rotation takes place. And in total, now you must remember that the midgut loop, it undergoes 270-degree counterclockwise rotation in total. So that is 270-degree, but 90-degree when there is herniation, and 180-degree when it returns back. So this is 270-degree rotation, that is the counterclockwise rotation. So this is showing you the first rotation, 90-degree, and this is showing you the rest of the 180-degree rotation. And at the time, these jejunal loop, they are first to enter back into the abdominal cavity when it returns back, and it accompanied by the cecum and the large intestine along with it. So jejunal loop, when it is going to re-enters initially at first into the abdominal cavity, it accommodates towards the left quadrant of the abdomen. So that's how the jejunum are present towards the left side, and then this cecum appendix along with its large intestine, these are going to align towards the right quadrant of the abdominal cavity. So initially this cecum, that is going to be present just below the stomach. So we say this is subhepatic cecum, or this is in the subhepatic region. So this is subhepatic cecum, and then it grows down with its further development towards the right iliac fossa. That is showing you its downward growth and elongation towards the right iliac fossa. So again here, the rotation of the midgut loop, there is a cranial and caudal limb you can see, and this is the superior mesenteric artery. Whenever there is rotation, that caudal limb, that is showing the cecal bud or the swelling, that moves up, and the cranial limb, it moves down. So here you have seen actually that cranial one, that is the midgut loop, that cranial limb it elongates, and that is showing rapid growth, that is growing very rapidly and elongates, and it is giving rise to the jejunum and ileum. And jejunum is the one which returns initially and first inside into the abdominal cavity, and the total rotation is counterclockwise to 70 degree, that you have seen. So that's how the gut tube that is developing. So again, the cephalic limb of the midgut loop, the cecal bud is showing its caudal limb. There is rotation 90 degree counterclockwise, and then it has to return back. There is 180 degree counterclockwise and total 270 degree counterclockwise rotation that has been shown by the midgut loop. So what are the factors which are responsible for retraction of herniated loops? That is, you have seen many times that the time of the physiological herniation is between 6th to 10th week. So this herniation starts at the 6th week, and the retraction back of the herniated loop, that is at the 10th week of the development. So when there is the beginning of 10th week, then there is reduction of the physiological herniated loops. They are showing you the retraction, and the factors which are responsible for that retraction are: number one, the regression of the mesonephric kidney, the kidney that is going to show now the less growth, and there is regression of the kidney. There is reduced growth of the liver. Initially that has taken most of the abdominal cavity, but then when there is reduced growth, that is helping the retraction of the herniated loops back. Also the growth and expansion of the abdominal cavity, that is growing, and it becomes now more accommodating all the structures. And these are the factors, the three factors. Many times they have been asked what are the factors responsible for retraction. So you must remember that there is decreased growth in the kidney, the reduced growth of the liver, and increased growth or expansion of abdominal cavity. These are the factors which are helping in retraction. And the proximal part of the jejunum, which is the cephalic limb, that is the first part to re-enter and accommodate to the left side of the abdominal cavity. So that is going to lie in the left side. So for the development of the cecum and appendix, you have seen that initially there is the appearance of cecal bud or cecal swelling, and this is the anti-mesenteric border of the gut from where that swelling appears. So what is that anti-mesenteric border? You have seen that the small intestine has the mesentery. So that mesentery proper is attached to the one side of the gut wall, that is the mesenteric border where that mesentery is attached, and the opposite border or opposite part of the gut which is not having the attachment of mesentery, that is known as anti-mesenteric border. So this is the anti-mesenteric border where cecal swelling appears, and this cecal swelling that is going to grow more faster towards its apex, and very soon when diverticulum arises from the apex of the cecum, that is the appendix. So that is appendicular diverticulum, which also grow in length, and later the development and growth of the cecum, that is unequal. It's one part, as you have seen here, that this half and this part is growing faster as compared to its left half. So because of this unequal growth of the cecum, that is shifting the appendix towards the medial side. So it attains the posteromedial side of the cecum. So as it is going to shifting posterior to the cecum, so we label that this is behind the cecum, known as retrocecal appendix. So that is the normal position in the gross anatomy. I hope you have seen many positions of the appendix, but the normal position is retrocecal, which is present along the posteromedial aspect of the cecum. So initially that is in the midline from the apex, and then with the unequal growth of the cecum, that is shifted towards the posteromedial aspect known as keeping in mind the rotation of normal rotation of the midgut, you have seen when there is a normal rotation, then after retraction of the midgut into the abdomen, this is going to relocate, which is the small intestine, jejunum. It is the first which enters into the abdomen, and it is lie along the left quadrant of abdomen, and then this is the cecum and ascending colon and transverse colon. So initially this cecum that is lying along the liver, just below the liver, known as a subhepatic, then it descends and grows down into the right iliac fossa. So here you have seen that the duodenum and the small intestine are behind the large intestine. This is behind the large intestine. The transverse colon is present anterior to the duodenum, as that is going to fuse with the posterior abdominal wall along with its mesentery, but the transverse colon present anterior to it. But whenever there is a malrotation, in the malrotation, suppose that is the rotation which is counterclockwise, but if the rotation is clockwise manner, then what is going to happen, that this large gut is going to enter initially and at first into the abdomen, and it is going to lie into the left side, and the small intestine is present along the right quadrant of the abdomen. So this is the malrotation, or the rotation which is clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So there is also the volvulus. Whenever there is abnormality along its mesentery, the gut loops, they are going to rotate, and they loops around itself, giving this twisting and looping of the small intestine, which can lead to the obstruction of its lumen. That's why this is seen bluish in color, because of disrupted blood flow. So that is known as volvulus. So the twisting of the gut tube on itself, and then they are going to have the walls, and then twisting on itself, leading to obstruction, that is volvulus of the gut. So again here there is the malrotation, in which number one, you have seen the absent or incomplete rotation, in which this large intestine is going to lie on the left quadrant and small intestine on the right quadrant. Or there is the reversed rotation. Whenever there is reversed rotation, then as I have shown you that the transverse colon is present anterior to that duodenum. So when there is reverse rotation, then this duodenum and small intestine lie to be present in front of the large intestine. So the transverse colon, it is going to present posteriorly, and the small intestine is present to lie in front and anterior to the large intestine. So these are showing you all the components from your KLM, which we have seen that this is the incomplete or malrotation. This is showing you the reversed rotation. Here you can see the volvulus. This is the twisting of the gut tube on itself and leading to obstruction. This is showing you the subhepatic cecum. That is the cecum which is not descends down, and it retains its initial position when it enters into the abdomen, and it lies just below the liver. So that is the subhepatic cecum. And keep in mind that this just like the duodenum, the cecum along with the ascending colon is also going to plastered with the posterior abdominal wall, and its mesentery fuses with the parietal peritoneum along the posterior abdominal wall. So that is retroperitoneal structure as well. So all the retroperitoneal structures are fixed and immobile. But if the cecum persists its mesentery, then we label that this is mobile cecum. So there is also one condition in which the cecum, if retains its mesentery, and if the mesentery of cecum persists, then this is known as mobile cecum. And also there is the herniation can be possible into the that mesentery. There is the internal herniation of the gut, which you can see here, showing the internal herniation into the pockets of the mesentery and peritoneum. And again, this is showing you volvulus of large intestine. Here is the volvulus showing by the small intestine. They are showing the twisting, but this is the twisting of the large intestine along the small intestine, leading to duodenal obstruction and obstruction of small intestine. So the next defect that is associated with the vitelline duct, as the midgut loops, they are going to have the attachment with the umbilicus through the vitreointestinal duct, which has to regress and it become fibrosed and ligamentous. But if you can say here that this Meckel's diverticulum, it's that portion, which is the distal portion, it become fibrosed and give rise to the vitelline ligament, but the distal portion, it remain patent here. You can see there is no harm about it. And also here the vitelline, the central portion of the vitelline duct, that retains as a cyst, and its proximal and distal portion become fibrosed, but the middle portion, it retains as a cyst. That is a vitelline cyst. And if it is going to remain patent, that the vitelline duct is going to remain patent and open at the umbilicus, then there can be the it has been show the fecal discharge. So the intestinal contents and all the fecal matter, that is going to discharge from the umbilicus. So that fecal discharge is indicative of vitelline fistula. So again, to show you different anomalies associated with Meckel's diverticulum, so keep in mind that this Meckel's diverticulum, it may contain the patches of the gastric mucosa and pancreatic mucosa, pancreatic structure. So they are the ectopic location, or which is the abnormal location of the presence of the gastric mucosa and the pancreatic tissue. And definitely from the gastric mucosa and from the pancreatic tissue, the enzymes and the HCl that has been released, and this is leading to the ulceration of that ileal diverticulum. So this Meckel's diverticulum is also called ileal diverticulum. So ulceration of the Meckel's diverticulum, that is most commonly associated with the ectopic gastric mucosa and pancreatic tissue, and this can lead to the bleeding into the abdomen. So this can this ulceration can produce the bleeding as well. And here you have seen this ileal diverticulum, which is patent distally, but it's more distal portion that remains the fibrosed. And here you have seen, if it remains patent, then this is the vitelline fistula or the omphaloenteric fistula, and in this case the fecal discharge has been shown in the umbilicus. And when its central portion remains as a cyst-like structure, then we label this as omphaloenteric cyst, and its proximal distalmost portions, they are going to become fibrosed. Along that Meckel's diverticulum, the small intestine can also show the volvulus, and it is also leading to the twisting of the Meckel's diverticulum. So this is the volvulus of the Meckel's diverticulum. And here this is showing you the fibrosed cord of the Meckel's diverticulum, and You have seen now these different anomalies. So this fibrous cord that is just connecting the midgut loop, that is the small intestine, the ileum from the umbilicus. So the ileal diverticulum, which is connecting the ileum from the umbilicus, that is the persistent fibrous cord of the Meckel's diverticulum. Now this is the defect which is showing you that is the defect associated with the physiological herniation, and you have also seen it in the body cavities, in the anomalies along with the body cavities, and that is the herniated gut loops, which is the small intestine, showing the physiological herniation between 6 to 10 weeks. And if it fails to return back, so the failure of the retraction of the herniated gut loops back into the abdominal cavity, that is showing you this omphalocele. So the omphalocele is going to be having that amniotic covering that has been covered by the amnion, but it is different from the gastroschisis, in which there is no envelope of the amniotic membrane, and it is going to expose to the amniotic fluid, and that is the situation of gastroschisis. But the physiological herniation failure, that leads to the omphalocele. So now here I end up with my today's lecture regarding the development of the midgut along with its anomalies. If you have any question and are unable to understand any point, feel free to contact me and clear your concepts side by side. Thank you very much.